Chapter 1. Today had been a rather uneventful day for Issei and the peerage of Rias's Gremory. No surprise visitors, no sudden attacks from Issei's perverted friends, and no tests which would have been a great way to ruin a day. However, there was one change from the usual routine. The usual teacher for the class was off. He had phoned in to say he had been suffering a bad flu and couldn't make it, and so, the head of the faculty had asked Rossweisse the newbie to take on the task. And while Rossweisse had expected the class to be rather rowdy, they were in fact very reserved. Whoa, Rossweisse is killing it today. I've never seen the class this quiet. Issei told himself. I'm impressed. Usually there is at least one person who wants to make the new teacher life a living hell. I wonder why it's so tame. Didrag piped up. I'm not sure. It could be that she's just really good at. Oh, Issei sighed, after he realized why the class was so quiet. What is it, Issei? Didrag asked. Rossweisse's suit isn't buttoned right. She's left the top buttons open, and I don't think she's got a bra on. Issei to Didrag as he focused on Rossweisse's chest and could clearly see her ample bosom. He then turned to look round the room, looking at the Motohama and Matsuda, who exemplified what all they guy were feeling as they were a mix of being slack-jawed and intently focusing their gaze on Rossweisse's chest, noticing a little jiggle as she moved, while the girls seemed to be either none the wiser, or more likely they were too embarrassed to say anything. It's defiantly a predicament, isn't it, Issei? You say to her, then you're embarrassing her, you don't, then you're allowing people to perv on her. Issei, are you listening to me? Didrag yelled as he realized that Issei had in fact zones out complete, his gaze intently focused on Rossweisse's bosom. Ah, yeah, Didrag. It is. Issei mumbled. I'll be saving this to the gentleman folder. Issei chuckled to himself. I wish I didn't hear that, Issei. You good for nothing pervert. Why did I have to get stuck to some like this? Didrag growled in embarrassment as Issei simply ignored him and kept his focus purely on Rossweisse. Once classes for the day were finished, Issei headed to the club room, alongside Asia and Zenobia, who were all wondering what Rias had in store for them today. As they entered the room, they saw that everyone was there except of Azazel. It's good to see you all. We have a busy day ahead of us. Rias proclaimed as she was ready to announce to the group their tasks for the day. However, she was soon interrupted when a call came from her desk and a crimson symbol appeared. Rias walked over to her desk and tapped the symbol, showing who was calling. Hello, brother. It's been a while since we last spoke. What's the occasion? Rias asked as Issei and the rest of the peerage headed over to see Sirzex. It's good to see you to Rias, and hello to everyone. I hope my sister has been keeping all in high spirits. Sirzex called with a cheeky smile marking his face. She has, Sirzex. Issei bellowed as A stuck his face in photobombing Rias. Glad to hear, and Issei, it's good to hear from you. I hope my sister has been taking good care of you. Sirzex asked, giving Issei a wink as Rias turned bright red, knowing all too well what he was implying. Brother. That is so inappropriate. I was simply asking if you have been looking after him, that's all, Sirzex stated in a cheeky manner, as the rest of the peerage chuckled. Issei's fine, besides I'm sure you know that it isn't just Rias who is taking care of him. Akino purred as she leaned on Issei's shoulder, her boobs pressing on his back making him shudder. Oh, they're so close. Issei bellowed to himself. Right, that's it. I'm changing the subject before this gets lewder than it already is. So what did you call for, brother? Rias huffed. Ha ha ha, always so serious. I have received word that someone from Asgard has asked if they could meet you to discuss an important issue. They had been told of the success of the peace conference held at the academy and asked to have the meeting held within the school grounds. Why did they ask you and not me directly, and who is it that asked to meet? Rias asked. They didn't want to cause potential issues by asking directly. Also, they asked to keep their identify a secret until you finally meet. So are you able to meet with them? Yes, it should not be an issue. When will I meet with them? Rias took a deep breath and sighed before answering, mulling over the decision before coming to her decision. In a few hours, Rias. Sirzex stated bluntly, getting straight to the point. What? That's really short notice. Issei yelped. They said they only had this time to spare, as their role is rather demanding. Okay, tell our guest that we will meet in the gymnasium. Is there anything else we need to know? Rias asked as she rubbed her chin, making sure she hadn't forgotten to say anything important. Thank you, sis. I'll let them know, in a word of caution. Please be on your best behavior. Asgardians are known for being very traditional and serious when it comes to matters of great importance, so please be on your best behavior. I'll see you all later. Bye. Searsex stated as he waved farewell to the peerage and deactivated his symbol, ending the talk. Okay. Looks like we have an important guest coming in a couple of hours. I suggest we get cleaned up and check the school for anything that could displease our guest if they ask for a tour of the premises, Rias proclaimed. Hi. The peerage called as they prepared the school as best they could, running to each of the department and rate checking for anything that could offend or lower the view of their guest. 3 hours passed and the peerage have managed to remove anything that could offend their guest, including a well-hidden lewd picture which was sticking partial out of Motohama's desk, which Issei confiscated for safekeeping, before anyone noticed. Well done everyone. Looks like everything's in order. So it's just a matter of waiting. Rias cheered as the group started talking among themselves as they waited. So who do you think our mystery visitor is? Issei asked to Gasper and Kiba. Well, let's look at what we know. Whoever turns up, we know they're from Asgard, and given Serzek wished to keep their identity a secret, it is definitely someone of high importance. Kiba stated as he broke down the facts. They could be a member of the royal family, perhaps Odin or Thor. Gasper sighed. It would be strange for it to be Odin, as we know him and he is very open, so hiding his identity wouldn't seem like something he would do. Issei replied, chuffed with himself that he came up with a sound argument. Also, Thor seems too loud and proud to want to hide his arrival from what I've been told by Rossweisse. Kiba added. Could it be a lower member of the Aesir or Vanir, like Njord or Freyr, maybe Tyr? Kiba stated in a curious tone, trying to remember other members of the Norse pantheon. Guess we'll find out when they arrive. Rias, looks like our guest is coming. Issei called to Rias. He pointed to a particle of purple light forming in the center of the gymnasium. As the rest of the peerage rushed over to meet their guest, they straightened themselves up and made sure to correct any issues with their uniforms. However, it turned out that this was in fact a complete waste of time, as this was not their guest, but Azazel. Hey kids, I was out having a few drinks and Searsex called me to say we had a guest coming, so I came as soon as I could, after I finished a few bottles of whiskey. Azazel. You're an ass, you know. You could have helped us out, but instead you decided to be selfish and get drunk. Rias yelled, clearly pissed off. It's not my fault, I have a bar close to my apartment, besides it was my day off. Azazel countered, crossing his arms and turning away from Rias's gaze. After an awkward silence, Azazel walked over to Rias, took a deep breath and huffed. After having a little time to think, Azazel realized he had in fact been in the wrong. I'm sorry, it was selfish of me not to help out. Is there anything I can do to help? It fine, we did everything, so just make sure you're presentable. Azazel nodded and walked over to stand beside Issei and straightened up his suit, and ran his hands through his hair to give him a smarter appearance. Once he did so, he leaned down to whisper something in Issei's ear. A word of advice, don't ever argue with a girl when you're in the wrong. It's a great way to get blue-balled, yelled at or punched. Thanks for the tip, Issei whispered back. After another half an hour, small sparks of golden light appeared in the exact place where Azazel's portal had opened. Looks like our guest is about to arrive. I need everyone on your best behavior. Rias proclaimed. Yes, Rias. The group cried. And Issei. Please keep your perverted side in check. I don't want to worry our guest in case they assume that you're a sex pest. What? Me? A sex pest? I'm not that bad, am I? Issei yelped as he looked to the rest of the group, who seemed to be nodding in agreement with Rias. You are a little obvious in how you show your pervertedness, Issei, Gasper whispered. Cough cough, nosebleed. Cough. Azazel pretended to cough, bring in a deathly stare from Issei, and a collection of chuckles from everyone else, except for Rias, who was intent on watching the portal. Shut up, Azazel. Right, calm down, our guest is almost here. Rias ordered as the peerage refocused and saw that the portal was fully formed. It was shining bright gold with deep orange at the edge of the portal, its appearance almost like a mini sun covered in Norse runes and symbols. Ch1 of 10 next. Chapter 2. As soon as the portal had completely manifested, 11 soldiers clad in golden armor appeared from the portal and stood either side of it, their weapons which ranged from spears and hammers to swords and axes. After once they had lined up, another figure appeared and walked slowly and confidently from the portal, a woman, tall in stature with bright silver hair and curves that would bring a man to his knees. Her armor was as golden as her soldiers but was even more ornate with silver inlays of Norse runes and symbols covering every inch of the armor, and unlike her soldiers she wore no helmet. No, it can't be, Rossweisse gasped as she realized who had come to visit. Who is it, Rossweisse? Asia asked in a worried tone, surprised to see Rossweisse so worked up. Wait a minute, I've seen her before. Issei yelled to himself. Hello, it is a pleasure to meet you, Rias Gremory. I am Gondal, leader of the Valkyries and advisor to the Allfather. Grandmother. Rossweisse called as she broke ranks and walked over to Gondal. It's been a while, granddaughter. Granddaughter. The peerage yelled in shock. Even the level-headed Azazel reacted with similar shock, likely due to him being in an slightly inebriated state. Yes, that right, I'm surprised my granddaughter never told you. Well, I never thought it would be necessary. How's are the Valkyries? Rossweisse asked. Ask them yourself, Gondal stated as she turned to her guards, who removed the full-face helmets, revealing that underneath their armor were a group of very beautiful women. By Odin's beard. It's so good to see you all. Rossweisse called as she rushed over to the girls as they embraced into a giant group hug. It's been way too long since I last saw you all. I know. How's life been? One of the Valkyries asked happily, wanting to hear everything that Rossweisse has been up to. It been pretty good. I'm working as a teacher in this school and I fought in a raiding game. Oh yeah. We watched it live. You were amazing, especially that spell you cased to fool Sarah or Bale into think you had been knocked out. You were always very resourceful, Rossweisse. I bet you're an amazing teacher. Rossweisse and the Valkyries chatted for a short while, just catching up with one another. So Rossweisse, are you going to introduce us? Rias asked as Rossweisse turned to Rias with a big smile on her face. Of course, well there's. Rossweisse started to talk only for Issei to interrupt her. If you wouldn't mind, Rossweisse, could I say who they are? Okay. How do you know their names? We haven't even met them before. Kiba asked, rather dubious of Issei's attempt. Rossweisse showed me a picture of them a few weeks ago and she told me who they all were. Issei leaned over to Kiba and explained himself. Plus a little help from a certain booblingual, Issei thought as she focused his power on the girls, showing a they range of opai, that varied in size and shape, as they spoke their owners' names to him. Well there's, Brumhilder, Kara, Sigrund, Svava, Gal, Rist, Mist, Skogul, Gunur, Skegjold, Grimilda and Hildegund. Issei pointed to each of the girls as they nodded as he got their names right. Whoa, I'm amazed you remembered them, Issei-kun. Wait, why's your nose bleeding? Rossweisse gasped in surprise, only for a sense of confusion to arise when she noticed the blood dripping from Issei's nose. Which alerted the rest of the peerage to look to him. You didn't do what I think you did, Issei. Kiba groaned as he turned away from Issei, who was grinning like an idiot. I can't believe you, Issei. Rias growled as she walked over to him and gave him a hard smack to the back of the head, knocking the grin of his face. I see the Opai dragon lives up to his infamous reputation. It rather refreshing compared to the usual wielders who were bloodthirsty maniacs from the last time I met one. I hope he hasn't been too much of a handful, Didrag. It is a pleasure to see you again, Gondal. I've had a lot worse wielders to deal with, but I still have to get used to how perverted he is. Long has it been since we last saw one another. Didrag called. It must be 400 years now. Tyr still had his hand at back then. Gondal called as she approached Issei. And still as ravishing as ever. Didrag, why are you being so nice to her, and I don't appreciate you telling her how much of a pervert I am? Issei asked. She was one of the few people to treat me as a thinking being and not a monster when I was in my prime. I owe it to her to at least compliment her, and you brought my comment upon yourself for your blatant use of your powers. Didrag explained. And this is your wielder. Not what I expected, but still, he defeated Loki, so I cannot underestimate his abilities. Thanks, I guess. I'm Issei Hyodo. Issei put his hand out. It nice to meet you. Now Rias, if it is possible, now that the pleasantries are out of the way, let's get down to business. Gondal shook Issei's hand as she spoke. Only to break from him and head over to Rias. Would you like to have this discussion in our club room? It would be far more comfortable for you. Rias asked. I have no problems continuing our talk here. It means we don't waste time so we can get straight to the matter at hand. Okay. So why did the leader of the Valkyries wish to meet with us? Rias nodded as she straightened up and kept eye contact with the gondol. As I'm sure you know, we Valkyries are renowned for our honor and prowess in battle, but also for enchanting beauty, which results in us having many suitors in our lives, and that is why I am here. Quote. Do you wish to offer the hand of a fellow Valkyries to one of our members? Rossweisse asked as she walked over to her grandmother. That is incorrect. I am here to deal with a marriage proposal which I set up for you, my little Weisse. You are to be wed to commander of the Einherjar, Hrothgar Lodbrok. Gondel turned to her granddaughter using her pet name for her granddaughter. What's the Einherjar? Gasper whispered. They are Odin's elite guard. They are fated to fight against the armies of Loki and his allies when Ragnarok comes. Kiba bent over to whisper his answer to Gasper, trying to not interrupt the main discussion. What? You must be kidding. You cannot do this to me. I'm a free woman. I can choose who I want to marry. Rossweisse yelled. You wish for me to remove Rossweisse from my peerage, so that she can be betrothed. Rias stated coldly. Yes, that's correct. I cannot allow my servant to be taken away to deal with a matter that they had no influence in deciding. I would be betraying the values I uphold and would deeply disrespect Rossweisse's autonomy. Unfortunately, I must disagree, for you see, unlike your other members, Rossweisse is a Valkyrie, which is a title which can only be revoked by the Allfather himself. The Allfather never gave Rossweisse permission to leave, so she is technically still a Valkyrie in the service of the Allfather, so is under my supervision as their leader, and as my granddaughter I have the right under Asgardian law to arrange a marriage for her until she is 25 years of age. That can't be right, Rias hissed. I'm afraid it is, princess. I have had to deal with my fair share of Asgardian law. As Governor General and under their laws Gondel can do this, and unfortunate due to the circumstances of how you acquired Rossweisse, she never formally left her role as a Valkyrie, so you must release her from your peerage, I'm afraid. Azazel sighed. I won't allow this. I refuse to do this. How could you do this to me? Rossweisse screamed at Gondel. We have a bloodline to continue and I will not allow you to disgrace your family's name by breaching your duties of a Valkyrie. What would your mother and father think if they saw you acting like this? Gondel yelled as she scolded Rossweisse, as if she was treating her like a spoilt child. I'm done with this, I'm leaving, Rossweisse growled as she summoned a portal and decided to go home. Rossweisse, wait. The peerage cried as she left the gymnasium. That was not called for, Gondel. You cannot talk to your granddaughter like that. Rias hissed. You wouldn't understand the gravity of the situation. Rossweisse is the future of her bloodline, and I will not have it sullied by her falling in love with an inferior being, not worthy of her virginity. Gondel proclaimed in a dismissive tone, paying no heed to Rias's criticism. How dare you treat her like that? She is your granddaughter, for fuck's sake. I cannot let her be taken against her wishes into a marriage that she had no control over. Issei yelled as he summoned Diedrag's gauntlet, which was swiftly followed by the rest of the peerage summoning their weapons. If you wish to stand against me, then I guess our civil conversation must come to an end. Forbert dear. Gondel's monotone growl turned to a might roar as she placed her hand on the sword hanging from her belt, preparing to draw it from her scabbard, as her fellow Valkyries assumed a battle formation. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Wait, we can't have this happen. Azazel rushed in between the two groups, trying to keep the peace. Is it truly worth the price of peace, to attack one another? Remember, Gondel, that Rias is the heir to the house of Gremory and the sister of the current king of Hell and Rias. You must remember the difficulty we had brokering a peace agreement with Asgard. Do you want to see another war? Azazel looked to each of the leaders with a stern gaze. Both leaders disengaged, Rias deactivating her powers and Gondel removing her hand from her sword. You're right. Gondel sighed in a somber tone. Also, if I may, you have forgotten that there is a way for Rossweisse to challenge your decision. She can call upon Ekteskapelid camp. What the hell is that? Issei asked, confused at what Azazel had just said. It allows Rossweisse to challenge the marriage by challenging their partner to a duel, the winner of which either allows the marriage to continue or ends the proposals with no strings attached. Well, great, but wait. What if she doesn't want to fight in case she knows she will lose, as she may know who she is fighting? That's where the beauty of this is. It allows a champion to fight on the behalf of the party they wish to represent, so you could choose a champion right here and now. And given Rossweisse's response to the proposal, I don't believe she would refuse the opportunity to fight it. So I guess you've taken your side, Azazel. Gondal scowled. I wouldn't say that, rather I've armed those I've sworn to support with information to allow them to make a valid decision. As a true mentor would. Azazel gave a small smug smile, which clearly irritated Gondal. Alright, so who wants to be Rossweisse's champion? Rias turned to her peerage as she spoke. I'll do it. Issei said confidently. Is there anyone who wishes to stake their claim as to why they want to fight? Rias asked. I don't think anyone would. Issei the strongest member we have in. Akino smiled as she looked to Issei. That's true. Rias agreed with Akino. I think Issei has other reasons as to why he wants to fight for Rossweisse. Rias thought. Issei hates the idea of anyone not having the freedom to choose their own pathway in life. He couldn't stand by and allow Rossweisse to be married off without her consent. He fought Riser to save me from losing my freedom. No wonder he chose to be her champion, Rias told herself as she looked Issei with pride, who looked to her and smiled. Alright. If that your decision then I must accept it. Once you have informed Rossweisse of the plan, contact me and I shall send a portal for you so that you can arrive in Asgard. I believe we have nothing else to discuss. Yes, I believe we have covered everything worth mentioning. Goodbye Gondal, Rias said coldly. Gondal turned away and summoned a golden portal, signaling to her Valkyries to enter. The Naughted donned their helmets and entered the portal one by one. As soon as she approached the portal, Gondal stopped and turned back to face the peerage. A word of warning. Hrothgar is not to be underestimated. You may have the power of a dragon on your side, but I believe it would be unwise to assume that you have this duel already won. Gondal turned away and vanished into the portal. Now that we have that piece of information, I think we should go and find Rossweisse. Rias sighed, rubbing her eyes. Where could she be? Maybe the clubroom. Asia asked. Unlikely, she wouldn't want to be anywhere near her grandmother. In the event she decided to take a tour of the building, most likely she's headed back home. Kaneko explained in her usual monotone voice. I agree, and I think it would be best if we all head back, and let her know as soon as possible. Rias nodded and summoned a portal back to Issei's house. Previous ch2 of 10 next. Chapter 3. Once the portal appeared, the peerage walked into it and in a matter of seconds they were back at Issei's. Luckily Issei's mum and dad had decided to spend a few days away at a friend's house, which meant there were no worries of having them witness such a strange sight. Alright, everyone, I think it would be best for everyone to collect everything they think they will need for our visit to Asgard. Hi, the peerage called as Rias motioned for Issei to come over to her. I think it would be best for both of us to tell Rossweisse what we are doing. I agree, Rias. How about we tell her now? Issei asked. I think that would be best. Rias whispered as she turned and headed to Rossweisse's room with Issei at her side. Once they arrived at Rossweisse's room, they could make out the unmistakable sound of crying. Rossweisse, it's Rias. I have Issei with me, we have something to tell you. Can we come in? Rias spoke softly, not wanting to startle her, so she lightly knocked on Rossweisse's room door. After a short silence, Issei decided he couldn't leave Rossweisse like this, so to take his chances and open the door. We're coming in, Rossweisse, Issei called as he slowly opened the door only to see Rossweisse lying head down on her pillow crying. The room was filled with a mix of traditional Norse artwork and modern decor and clothing, which still had their discount labels on them. However, an obvious gap was visible on Rossweisse's desk, which had a mix of pictures, trinkets and office supplies. As Issei and Rias looked around, they saw that there was a picture frame on the floor, with fragments of glass surrounding it. Rias rushed over to Rossweisse to comfort her while Issei walked over to the frame and picked it up. No. Issei mumbled as he realized that the frame that had been broken was the one which held the picture of Rossweisse with her fellow Valkyries and her grandmother, which she had shown Issei when he heard her crying a few weeks ago. Please leave me alone. I'm a disgrace. Rossweisse wept. You're not a disgrace, Rossweisse, and I can't leave you alone. It wouldn't be right given everything you've been through today. Rias whispered as she lightly stroked Rossweisse's hair. But I have to leave. I broke my promise to you that it supports you and your family, and I've broken that promise, just like I broke my promise to my fellow Valkyries by leaving. I don't deserve to be comforted like this. Rossweisse whimpered. That's not true. You must remember when I heard you crying and you told me that you felt guilty for betraying your family and how you felt unworthy of your position. I helped you realize that you are loyal and you are worth treating as an equal. I still believe that now, and I will not stand by and let you taken from us. But there nothing you can do. Rossweisse cried, tears streaming down her face. Her eyes were red and puffy. That's why we are here. Azazel was able to bring to our attention that you could challenge the marriage. If you wished to contest the decision, you could challenge your betrothed to a duel and the winner would have their decision validated. Rias explained calmly in a soft tone of voice. But I wasn't there to say anything, and I know enough about my betrothed to realize that I have little chance of winning a duel. Azazel used your reaction to justify the duel. Your grandmother couldn't deny his point. However, we also found out that you could have a champion fight in your place, and we chose on your behalf since you were not there. Who did you choose? Rossweisse quietly asked. Issei raised his hand to choose. I couldn't let you be taken away from us. When Rias was forced to marry that burning chicken riser, I couldn't let her lose her freedom after she had fought so hard to keep it. I could let that happen again. Issei sternly spoke. I don't know what to say. Rossweisse muttered, trying to take what Issei had said in. He thinks I'm important to protect. No man has ever spoken to me like that. Rossweisse whisper turned to a happy cheer as she spoke to herself as she jumped from the bed and pulled Issei into a massive hug. Ah! Issei yelped in surprise. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Rossweisse cried as she helped Issei close. Tears of happiness fell from her eyes. If you're happy with this, I will inform Gondal so we can head to Asgard. Rias stated as she stood up from Rossweisse's bed and straightened her skirt. Wait. We're going to Asgard? Rossweisse asked, making sure she hadn't misheard Rias. Yes, is that a problem? Rias asked. No, it just. I can't believe you'll all get to see Asgard for the first time. Just to warn you, it's a bit different from what you'll be expecting. Quote. It shouldn't be an issue. So are you happy with me letting Gondal know our decision? Rias gave a small smile when she saw that Rossweisse was acting more like her normal self. Yes. Rossweisse stated confidently. Great. Once I've let her know, I'll inform the peerage and we will prepare for our visit. Rias proclaimed as she turned and headed out of Rossweisse's room. Rossweisse turned to face Issei, noticing he was looking at her with a smile. What are you smiling at, Issei? Rossweisse whispered in a happy tone. I'm happy to see you smiling, and acting like yourself. That's sweet of you to say, Issei. Rossweisse's lip curled into a cute smile. I promise you, I'll do everything in my power to keep you with us. No matter what. Issei confidently stated as she took Rossweisse's hands in his own and held them tightly in a reassuring manner. I know you will, Issei. I trust you. Rossweisse looked Issei in the eyes, seeing the determination in his gaze, which brought her some comfort as she thought of the gravity of the situation given her opponent. First, previous ch3 of 10 next. Chapter 4. After Rias contacted Gondal and provided the details needed for a portal to be summoned at Issei's home. After which Rias informed the peerage of the situation and made sure they had got everything they would need for their journey. After an hour of waiting, a portal appeared in the living room. It was different from the portal used by Gondal and her Valkyries, as rather than the golden glow, it was not a singular color but instead a collection of colors from ruby red and sapphire blue to emerald green and uranium yellow. Alright, everyone. We need to keep out best behavior. This is our first time in Asgard, and Rossweisse has informed me that their norms may come as a surprise to us, so please keep away from causing any issues. And Issei. Rias stated as she looked to Issei and pointed to him. Yes, Rias, what is it? You need to keep your pervy side in check, and for the love of Lucifer, if Odin offered to take you out to any strip clubs, please decline his offer. Rias groaned. Wait for what? You know I'm taking this serious, Rias. Sure. Issei, it's in your nature to be a pervert. Don't try and deny that. If the opportunity arose, you would happily go with Odin, Kaneko stated as everyone else chuckled except for Issei. I would. Issei mumbled as he imagined the situation taking place, and as if on cue Issei had a small nosebleed. And there's the proof you need. Kaneko pointed out the nosebleed and brought more laughs out, leaving Issei blushing with embarrassment. Okay. I think we've tormented Issei enough, let's get moving. Rias chuckled as she grabbed her bag and headed into the portal, followed closely by the rest of the peerage. Once they arrived, they were surprised to find that they were on a bridge, but it looked different from any bridge that anyone here had seen except for Rossweisse. Wait a minute. Where the hell are we? Issei yelled as he looked around to see a large golden wall in the distance, and as he looked he could only see blue skies and clouds, and that they were standing on a multicolored bridge made from what looked like crystal, which was standing without any forms of foundations to be seen. They must have teleported us outside the city walls, just in case, Rossweisse mumbled as she took in the familiar sight. The rest of the peerage looked around and saw that they were suspended in the air. What are we standing on and why aren't we falling? Asia asked, worried as she felt a little sick after looking over the side of the bridge. We are standing on the Rainbow Bridge. It is the only way to enter Asgard unless you're a member of the royal family. It floating thanks to spells placed upon the bridge by Odin, Rossweisse explained as she walked down the bridge alongside the rest of the peerage who were following her. Kind of strange, but I guess security must be their top priority. Zenobia grumbled as she looked at the bridge and why it was the only entrance into Asgard. It is said by the Norns, the weavers of fate, that when Ragnarok comes Asgard enemies will rise and attempt to destroy the universe, but Odin and his forefathers would not allow this and built the bridge so any land force would be stuck to a narrow passage, eliminating their strength in numbers if they ever decided to invade Asgard. That pretty smart. Zenobia said with a hint of surprise as she took the time to mull over Rossweisse's explanation. As the peerage walked to the gates of Asgard, an important question came to Rias. Hey, Rossweisse. Yes, Rias, what is it? I was wondering, do you know anything about your betrothed? You didn't challenge Gondal on arranging your marriage with him, and I was wondering if you knew him. Oh yeah, now that you mention it, you didn't freak put at who you were betrothed to, rather you freaked out because you had been betrothed without your consent. Asia stated. Well, to answer your question, Rias. Yes, I know Hrothgar. We were childhood friends, our families were close, we even trained together before I joined the Valkyries. Before our battle with Loki I was told he had been given the title of Master of the Einherjar. That's sort of sweet, I guess. Engaged to a family friend. Zenobia sighed. In a way it is, but I never felt any sort of romantic feelings towards him. He was kind but we were never that close. It could be a power move. With Rias, the marriage between her and Riser was part of efforts to bring up the devil numbers. Perhaps your grandmother was planning on marrying you so your two families are bound by blood. Maybe, though there was a rumor that went around before I left. What was it? Rias asked. Supposedly he was a bastard and that his father was the god Tyr, though I have no idea if this is the case. Who's Tyr? Issei asked. Tyr is the god of war. He famous for being very hot-blooded and for having one hand. Wait, a war god with one hand, sounds kind of lame. I wouldn't say that to him, Issei. Centuries ago the wolf Fenrir, who has fated the kill, Odin, was growing larger and more powerful with each day that passed, and the gods decided they had to trap him, so they asked the dwarves of Nidavellir to forge bonds to trap him, but every time they tried he broke them with no effort until the dwarves created a magical ribbon imbued with ancient runes, that were wrapped around Fenrir, but Fenrir wasn't stupid, so refused to stay still unless a god placed their hand in his mouth. It was Tyr who took that call. He placed his hand in Fenrir's mouth as he was bound, and as Fenrir tried to break free the ribbon tightened with every movement he made. After a while Fenrir grew tired and in anger bit down on Tyr's hand, removing it, but he didn't cry in pain or anger but smiled, happy that he gave his hand for the greater good. Okay, I take back what I said, that's a badass. After a short silence, Akenko decided to speak after having some time to think. Marrying you off into the Asgardian royal family, and give your powers as Valkyries and him being a son of a war god, your children would be very powerful. Perhaps Gondal knows the truth about his heritage and wants to have grandchildren born from powerful parents and or have a blood link to the throne. Perhaps. So Rossweisse, what do you know about Hrothgar that could help Issei? Rias nodded and turned to ask Rossweisse. Hrothgar is a very skilled combatant. You don't become the leader of the Einherjar if you're not good at fighting. From what I remember his weapon of choice was the axe, but he's skilled in most weaponry. He's extremely strong even by Asgardian standards, and while I remember him being rather average with magic, he could definitely pose a threat now if he's spent the time improving. Rossweisse told Issei as he nodded away. After a few more minutes of walking, the peerage came to halt as they saw the gates of Asgard, so large in size that they would dwarf many skyscrapers that are found on Earth. They were made of polished bronze, and adorned with carvings of battles and conquest, a testament to Asgard's dominance and strength. And standing in their way was a man, clad in the armor of bright gold and gunmetal gray, with a helmet which features large golden wings. He stood there stock still with a large two-handed sword, his hands resting on its pommel, and a horn on his belt, carved with numerous runes and adorned with many carvings. The man was large, easily over 6 feet tall and with a large frame with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. His skin was as pale as milk. But what stood out were his eyes. They were almost completely black and shined like polished obsidian, but the darkness of his eyes were broken by streaks and dots of bright white, like stars in the night sky. Halt! Who wishes to enter the home of the Aesir? The man called, his voice deep and booming. I am Rias Gremory, heir to the house of Gremory, and I am here for business with Gondel, the leader of the Valkyries, Rias proclaimed. Ah, Rune Princess, it is a pleasure to meet you in the flesh. I had been informed by Gondel of your arrival. I was told that your visit is to deal with a marital dispute regarding Rossweisse, is that correct? Yes, why do you ask? I was just ensuring that that was the nature of your trip. There have been many who come for more nefarious purposes, but I see no issues. It good to see you, Rossweisse. It been far too long since we last spoke. It has been a while, Heimdall. I hope things have been easy since we last spoke. Nothing significant. A few ruffians, but nothing beyond my abilities. Quote. Okay, it's nice to meet you, but I have one question. Who are you? Issei asked. My apologies, I should have been more hospitable. I am Heimdall. I am the all-seeing guardian of the Rainbow Bridge and the first line of defense against Asgard's enemies. All-seeing. Asia said quietly as it caught Heimdall's ear. Yes, child, I was blessed with the gift of all-sight and I can see anything I desire as long as I focus. I have seen stars on the other end of the cosmos, black holes as large as galaxies and supernovas which have wiped out solar systems, just by focusing on the night sky. I use this power to watch the 9 realms and inform the Allfather of any potential threats. That's amazing. Issei cried in awe of this power. Image the possibilities, how much you change the world with that power, Kiba said, fascinated as to how this power could benefit the world. And image the amount of peeping on sexy women you could do. Ha ha ha, Issei chuckled, forgetting to keep this point to himself. What? Heimdall yelled in shock, gripping the hilt of his sword tighter. Issei, that is most inappropriate, especially as to one as respected as Heimdall. He would never abuse such a power. Rossweisse smacked Issei on the back of the head for his comment. Ouch. Issei howled as he rubbed the back of his head, wishing he had been his Viceroy instead. My apologies for my servant, he has an immature mind, Rias stated in an apologetic tone, calming Heimdall down. I guess I should have expected it from the Red Dragon Emperor. I think it would be best if keep moving, and just to inform you, you must head to the royal palace. Odin has been kind enough to allow you to stay in the palace until the situation has been resolved. Heimdall stated in a rather annoyed tone. Thank you, and we will be off. Rias bowed her head and walked towards the gates, motioning the peerage to follow her as the gates of Asgard opened. Once the peerage were out of earshot, Heimdall mumbled to himself. That was embarrassing. How did he know that I did snoop of women across the realms? I guess it takes a perv to know a perv. Whoa, this place is amazing. Look at how beautiful this place is. Asia yelled excitedly as she looked around in awe at the architecture. It is amazing. Oh look, it's a bakery, it smells amazing. Zenobia stated as she soon got sidetracked by the smell of a bakery, resulting in her rushing over to pick out a cake to have for later. Followed by Kaneko, whose Nekomata senses were on full alert, being overloaded by the delightful smell of freshly baked pastries. As the peerage explored the kingdom and admired just how elegant the architecture was, with as a mix of carved stone and woodwork as well as the intricate use of precious metals and gems which made the city look like a shining jewel. After the peerage made their way to the palace after a few stops, to buy some mementos, only stopping when they heard the unmistakable sound. What the hell is going on? It sounds like there's a battle. Issei groaned as he looked to find the source of the disturbance. Over there, that's where the sound's coming from. Kiba called as he rushed over to a large building. Compared to many of the buildings close to it, looked far older than many of the other buildings, its wood showing the patina of hundreds if not thousands of years of wear and exposure, but its carvings were still as intricate as those found on the new buildings. If it's someone in need of help, we can't leave them. On 3 we open the doors, Rias called as the peerage rushed over to the doors. Rias, I don't think you should. Rossweisse said, trying to get Rias's attention, but she was cut off by Rias doing her countdown. 3, 2, 1. Rias called as she barged through the doors, only to find that the entire room was filled with men and women beating the life out of each other, armed to the teeth with every weapon imaginable, but with every wound inflicted they would magically regenerate to their original state. There were bars all down the sides of the building which seemed to go on forever, which pushed out drinks to every person who passed them, and to add to the chaos, there were also men and women with no clothes on doing all manners of acts, both violent or intimate, which seemed to connect with Akino, who had a smile on her face, which she hid behind cupped hands on her face. Not wanting the group to see that she was enjoying the show, given how depraved some of the acts were. What the hell is this place? The peerage called, except for Rossweisse. I was trying to tell you. This is Valhalla. You're kidding. Kiba gasped, shocked by what he saw. I'm not. Valhalla is a place where those who die fighting to go as a reward of their deeds, so they get a wide array of visitors. Odin had this place built to give them the motivation to fight. They can drink, fight, and fornicate to their heart's content, as long as they train for the day when the universe comes to an end. Looks like a den of destitution. Rias growled, wishing she hadn't laid eyes upon the actions taken in upon this room, only for two female voices to call out. Hello. I see you have seen the famous halls of Valhalla. I see it as a shock to the system. It takes a very particular taste to not be surprised by this. Kara. Svava. I see that you're both on duty, Rossweisse called as the two girls walked over to grate the peerage. Kara was the same height as Kara, with hair as black as night, with topaz eyes and skin that was kissed by the sun with an almost golden glow. She had broad hips and strong legs. She carried a spear covered with runes inlaid with gold. Svava was slightly taller than Kaneko, and was lightly built compared to Kara, but had a clearly feminine body. Her hair was a shining shade of copper, almost reflective. Her eyes were the color of polished sapphires, and her skin was as smooth as white marble, with small freckles covering her face. She carried a sword on her hip, and shield strapped to her back. It's good to see you again, Rossweisse, Kara said as she hugged her friend. I'm guessing you were distracted by the noise. Svava smiled as she spoke. It was rather surprising. I didn't expect Valhalla to be anything like this. Kiba chuckled, trying to play off the embarrassment he felt at what he had seen. To the eyes of those not from Asgard, has a unique taste which doesn't appeal to everyone, Kara stated. Is Hrothgar here? I was hoping to talk to him about the duel. Rossweisse asked as she around the hall to see if she could see Hrothgar. Oh no. Hrothgar doesn't spend much time here, he only comes here if there's been trouble involving any of the Einherjar. Besides, it's his day off from active duty, so I haven't seen him. Kara explained as she looked to Svava. We can take you to see the Allfather if you'd like. We were about to change shifts so are free at the moment, Svava stated as she hugged Rossweisse and then spoke to Rias and the peerage. If we aren't bothering you, that would be most kind of you to offer. Rias smiled. No problem at all, Rias, follow us, Kara stated as she took the lead, as the peerage followed, except for Rias. Issei, what are you doing? Didrag called. I'm getting a look at the Tigo biddies at the back, what a set, I just need to, wait, I've got it. Issei chuckled as a light bulb went off in his head, bringing a sense of dread upon Didrag. Oh no, no, I won't be seen doing this, Didrag growled. Well tough, if I see titties I cannot be stopped. Boost, Issei confidently stated as he raised his left hand to his eyes and used Didrag's power to enhance his sight, giving his a clearer and closer view of the boobs at the back of the hall. Oh yeah, Issei chuckled, only Asia to come by. Issei, are you coming? We shouldn't get split up or else we will. What are you doing? Asia asked curiously. Oh nothing, Issei mumbled, forgetting to deactivate his gauntlet. You sure? Asia looked sternly at Issei, doubting him. Issei was trying to sneak a peek at the naked women at the back. Didrag called. You betrayed me, Didrag, how could you? I thought we were partners. It was for the greater good. Didrag grumbled. Issei, you perv, you can't be like this, we have the reputation of the peerage to uphold. Asia whined as grabbed Issei by the cheek and dragged him back to the group had made their way into the palace where Odin and his kin lived. Issei screaming in pain as he was dragged along, while Didrag chuckled, glad to get a bit of payback for all the actions that had tarnished his reputation. First, previous ch4 of 10 next. 5. Once inside the palace could only be described as a work of art. A mix of the traditional Nordic artwork, carving and masonry mixed with the architecture that only a god could design, which made the palace stand out from any of the other buildings within Asgard. As they arrive at the throne room, a large man stood in the throne room and it wasn't Odin. There you are. The man cried happily as he hurried over to the peerage, and to everyone's surprise he scooped Issei up into a bear hug, his large frame towering over Issei, his laughter almost shaking the room like a thunderstorm. What the hell? Who's this lunatic? Issei cried in pain from the pressure of the hug. Thor. Put him down. I think your welcome is a bit much for someone who wasn't expecting it. Rossweisse stated as Thor put Issei down. Issei's face had started to turn blue from a lack of oxygen. Thor, as in the thunder god Thor. Issei yelped as he looked at the man in front of him. The man was large, at least 7 feet tall. His body could only be described as Herculean in its structure with his large barrel chest and shoulders with thick arms and legs built for war. He had a thick red beard braided into a point and his eyes were as blue as the sky on a summer's day. On his hip was the hammer of legend. The hammer that flattened mountains in its wake, and had felled armies with a single blow. Mjolnir, forged by the dwarves as a gift to the gods, it was of stonewashed finish, with runes of power and strength ingrained into the very grain of the metal. Rossweisse, it's good to see you again. I must apologize for my father's actions. He can be rather rude without knowing it. Thor said apologetically. Well, it is in the past now, Thor, but thinking about it still hurts. How's life in Asgard been since I left? Not much really, it's been rather quiet actually, although I had to battle several frost giants who tried to invade Nidavellir last week. They didn't last long. So you're the might, why Thor? The tales of your feats are legendary. My brother has told me all about you, Rias stated as she walked up to face the thunder god. It's an honor to meet you, ruined princess, you're more beautiful in person. I hope your brother is doing well. Thor leaned down and spoke with a surprising level of charm, for a man of his build before he kissed Rias's hand as a sign of respect. Wait, you know Thor? Issei gasped. Yes, Thor has visited our home many times, he's good friends with Sarorg as well and they usually spar one another for fun and end up shaking the foundations of the palace, when they're together, Rias stated as Issei looked to Thor in awe. This guy spars Sarorg for fun. He a freaking badass. Thank you, Issei. It kind of you to say. I think we should spar sometime. I've never tested my mettle against the Red Dragon Emperor before. Okay. Issei nervously stated as he thought of the odds of him surviving such a sparring match. Thor, can I ask you something? Issei piped up. What do you wish to ask? Can I have a go at lifting your hammer? Issei leaned towards Thor. You can try, Thor chuckled as he pulled the hammer from his belt and placed it on the ground. Issei, why are you wanting to lift the hammer? Jasper asked. The power of it was amazing. I've got to see if I can feel that kind of power again. Issei roared as he remembered the first time he lifted Mjolnir, and feeling the lighting running through his views. Issei leaned down and grabbed the handle, and tried to lift it like it was a normal hammer, but it didn't move. What the hell? Issei huffed as he pulled the hammer harder, even resorting to grabbing the hammer in both hands and tried to sumo squat the hammer but it didn't work. That's odd, Issei was able to move it when we fought Loki. Akeno sighed. Come on Issei, keep trying. Asia cried, trying to motivate Issei. Come on Issei. Kiba called, followed by the rest of the peerage joining in. I've got to lift it, come on you damned hammer. Is cried as he pulled with all his might. The hammer slowly rose off the ground, less than a millimeter of the ground. It's off the ground. Rias cheered. It's up, haha, it's up. Issei cried in joy as he then put the hammer back down, with a loud thud. Ha ha ha. It's been so long since I've seen Mjolnir lifted without me permitting the person to wield it, Thor laughed hearted, patting Issei hard on the back. Wait, what? The hammer has an enchantment meaning only the worthy can wield it. Mjolnir is a weapon with such power that if it fell into the wrong hands, could destroy entire realms if used at its full power. The enchant keeps it out of the wrong hands, however, I have full control over the enchantment so I can remove the requirement if the need comes. Ah, I see our guests have arrived. It's good to see you all again. A raspy male voice called from across the throne room. As the peerage turned to see the source of the voice, it was clear who it was. Odin, Allfather and King of Asgard, dressed in a white and blue robe, trimmed in gold, on his head, a golden crown, encrusted with precious jewels, and engravings of exquisite detail. His left eye covered by a form of monocle made of gold. However, he had not come alone, as on his right-hand side was Gondel, not in her war gear, but instead, a well-fitted light gray dress, exemplifying every curve. Gondel's hair was in a ponytail, with a large ornate hairpin holding her in position. And following close suit were two more Valkyries, Mist and Skogul. Mist was tall and slender, almost matching the height of Gondel, but had nowhere near the level of curviness that Gondel possessed. Even in her armor she looked slim. Mist had long blonde hair that flowed over her armor. She carried a large Dane axe in her hand, with a pattern-welded edge and a bear engraved on the body of the axe. Skogul was around the same height as Rossweisse and was built similarly to her as well. But what stood out was hair, with no hair on the left-hand side of her head, which was instead covered in black tattoos resembling the engravings on Thor's hammer. In her right hand was a large warhammer, which seemed to crackle and arc with lighting even when not in use. Oh whoa, she's stunning. No Issei, don't get distracted, I have to focus. Can't let anything distract me. My goal is to keep Rossweisse with us and I can't let anything lose focus on that mission. Issei mentally yelled at himself, as he slapped himself to keep focus, drawing a laugh from Didrag. I hope Asgard has met all your expectations, Odin asked as he approached the peerage. It is truly a beautiful kingdom, rivaling the beauty of many of the devil kingdoms. Rias smiled as she spoke. Truly. I thank you for the compliment. Odin bowed his head accepting the compliment. Now, regarding the issue at hand, we shall be holding the duel tomorrow. Better to resolve the matter quickly before it grows out of hand. You each have your own rooms which the Valkyries will escort you to when you wish. However, there is much we can do and discuss before that. Odin explained as he pointed to Mist and Skogul, who smiled and waved to the group. What did you have in mind? Zenobia asked, looked curiously at Odin. This palace has all manner of interesting sights, from the treasure room to the armory. I show you what we Norse gods have at our disposal. Sure, why not? Rossweisse said happily, as she looked to the rest of the group who were happy to tag along. If you don't mind, Rossweisse, can you stay behind? I wish to speak too. Gondel asked politely, looking to her granddaughter, who cut her off. No, I'm not in the mood for talking. If I may, can I head to my room? I feel exhausted from all the excitement from today, Rossweisse said coldly as she looked to Rias for permission. Yes, you may head to your room. If you need anything, just give us a call, Rias said quietly as Odin lewd to Mist and signaled her to take Rossweisse to her room, as the rest of the peerage headed off. But as they did so, Odin made sure to walk beside Issei and whisper something in his ear. There's a strip club on level 4, if you wish to join me, later on. Issei held back a chuckle at the idea, but then remembered he had a job to do. Thanks, Odin, but I've got to stay focused. Maybe when the issue's been dealt with I'll take you up on it, Issei whispered back, not wanting to offend the Allfather. As the peerage, Odin, Gondel and Skogul headed off to see the sights of the palace, Rossweisse headed to her room, taking the time to speak with Mist. Do you think I'm wrong in all this? I'm not sure. I don't know all the facts, but Gondel, worried you would be alone for the rest of your life, given you've never had a boyfriend. She wanted to give you a chance to have someone you love and felt this was the best choice. She went through the same process and found the love of her life. She's hoping you'll be as lucky as she was. She even set it up with a family friend, so the fear of not knowing the person was removed. I don't want to have my freedom taken away without me having a say. Since I left Asgard, I've had the opportunity to see what this universe has to offer. I can't leave that behind. Rossweisse proclaimed. I understand completely. You have done so much since you left, and you don't want to bound to someone you don't have any romantic feeling for and lose the freedom you have. On top of that, you have people you care for and want to support, and as a true Valkyrie, you'll fight to keep that, and I'll support you all the way. 1001st proudly states, holding her hand on her heart, as if she was swearing an oath of allegiance once the pair reached Rossweisse's room. Thank you. Rossweisse politely whispered as she gave her friend a hug, her eyes tearing up slightly. If you need anything, let me know. I'll be heading back to find Odin and your friends, in case you're looking for me. Mist smiled as she turned and headed back down the hall, giving Rossweisse a quick wave before leaving Rossweisse to her own devices. I'll get unpacked, get a quick shower then see how everyone enjoyed the tour. Rossweisse mumbled to herself as she summoned a portal and pulled out her suitcase which she stored in a pocket dimension for ease of transport. After a short time of unpacking, Rossweisse prepared herself for a shower only for a knock on her room door. I wonder who that is. Probably one of the girls who got sick of the tour. Rossweisse asked herself as she headed to the door and saw it wasn't one of the girls but a tall man. Hello Rossweisse, it'd been a while. The man beamed. Hrothgar. What are you doing here? Rossweisse gasped, at the sight of seeing her betrothed. First, previous ch 5 of 10 next.